Welcome to 13 minutes of gig news in 13 minutes or less. Okay, guys. Uber team. We've talked about it before. It's been in a few markets. As everything with Uber, it rolled out in a few markets first, and now it is rolling out everywhere. In the past week, we've seen it roll out into at least 20 new cities, if not more. Those cities include Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and many others. Drivers, I urge you to look into this yourself before putting yourself in the position of driving an unaccompanied minor. As a rideshare driver who has been doing Uber and Lyft since 2015, I can tell you that since day one, even before they were in Colorado in 2009, everything with Uber always changes. They add a feature, they take it away. They add a feature. I mean, for example, the recording feature. The recording passenger feature was around before the pandemic in select cities. And now it's being rolled out as a new feature, like 7 years later. I mean, 6 years later. This is ridiculous. So that always has happened. But one thing that has always stayed true from 2009 until just recently was never, ever, ever an unaccompanied minor. And why is that? Because Uber works with insurance companies and they cover a certain amount during phases 2 and 3. Phase 0 is when you're in your car idle with the app on, waiting for a ride. Phase 1 is when you have received a ping, accepted it, and you are driving to the passenger. Phase 2 is you pick up the passenger and are taking them to their destination. I might have missed a phase in there, but regardless, once the passenger is in the car, okay, that phase is the most important phase. And in that phase, not much of the language in the TOS changed. So you are not protected. So look, since the inception in 2009, Uber partners have always been told no unaccompanied minors, never under any circumstances until just recently. And why did that happen? That happened because Uber saw a statistic that they pounced on and decided to throw their ethics once again out the window, because Uber saw that 16-year-olds in this country were about half as many are getting driver's license these days as were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So there is a lot of younger people who normally, like me, when I turned 16, I was at the DMV. I got my license that day. I was waiting for it. And most people I know around my age or younger, whatever, they did the same thing. That's not the case anymore. I don't know if the pandemic played a part of that or if it's just kind of the way that we're building things now and people just, for whatever reason, the cost of it, whatever, but people have stepped away from cars. Uber was supposed to be a solution to this, but now we're talking about minors. Minors aren't getting their licenses. Uber saw an opportunity and they said, you know what, let's grab this. Let's do it. So the only code that they've kept the whole time since inception, they have now thrown into the trash. Please, Uber rideshare drivers, do your research. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your research, because I happened to talk to some insurance companies, one small one, but two big ones. And one of them I'll name by name, Allstate. First, I'll say that the other ones are very unclear about this. And this is still a new feature. Uber clearly has sent over information, but if you don't carry the correct rideshare insurance for transporting people, again, this is for rideshare, if you don't carry the correct insurance already, they're not going to do anything for you. But if you are carrying the correct rideshare insurance that you need to, you are only covered up to a certain amount by Uber and by the company. Any lawsuit that would involve a child would go above and beyond that. But let's focus on Allstate for a minute. Allstate straight up told me that it does not cover drivers outside of the Uber coverage if no adults are in the car. So if you have Allstate insurance and you have Uber, and Uber Teen launched in your city, and you carry the correct rideshare insurance, you are not covered. I know it sounds strange. I know the TOS is always worded funny, but one thing about the TOS that always remains in place, and we need to remember this, is that at some point in there, if not many points, it always refers to you are the independent contractor, you are responsible for your business, and you will be held accountable for anything you do while operating on the platform. Therefore, Allstate not covering it, you're not covered. And if you're looking to pick up an Uber Teen ride because it's a little slow and you see an Uber Teen come through and you're like, I'll take that. You are putting your entire livelihood and probably the rest of your life if something were to go wrong. And I'm not saying it will, but you're rolling the dice every time. But you would be spending the rest of your life paying that off, and you would probably still never pay off the lawsuit because Uber will walk away and so will your insurance. Because if your insurance, like Allstate, doesn't have you covered, then neither does Uber. So what I need to say is, when I was speaking to the Allstate agent, I said, I'll be honest with you guys, I carry Allstate. So I actually was able to have a very candid conversation with my agent. He said, not a chance. Wouldn't do it. And the office I use, or the agency I use for Allstate, they won't do it. But he said if there was to be an Allstate agent that decided he would do it, the only way you're covered is if you go see your agent and get an actual signed letter saying that that agency specifically, whatever city you're in, whatever that agency's, Allstate agency's number is, they would have to list that in a letter with your name on it saying that they are allowing you to transport teenagers, and would have to be signed by the agent who runs the office, not by any office staff, by the agent who owns the office. So therefore, he told me, and he said, clearly, I can't promise this. He goes, but I know a lot of agents around the country. Not one of them will do this for you. So again, it's a very sketchy thing. And the burden will completely fall on you. You are an independent contractor. So please be careful. Please be careful. Also, all of this news that we talk about here on 13 Minutes and all the other things that I do, obviously the audio podcast as well, can be found on ridesharerodeo.com. Again, it's what I talk about here on the podcast, everything, and then tons more. Daily releases. The only real news out there. And you guys know what I'm saying. The only real news out there. If you missed the independent contractor forum that I held this week on Thursday with Kim Cavan, Karen Anderson, and Mike Karubi, they all represent different portions of the country, and they are the hardest hitters. They have testified in front of the House of Representatives committees. Mike Karubi writes federal legislation. You need to go watch this. Some of them in the past have been very just traditional independent contractor based. This one, we touched on a lot of gig app stuff too, specifically because I knew you guys would be interested. So please go watch that. It's a little over an hour, and it is definitely something that you guys should hear. So also this week, we witnessed a lot of, this happens all the time. Torsten, the Rideshare professor, he talks about this a lot. And Torsten's going to be joining David and I on a panel this Thursday on the Para channel. So please check that out as well, because we're going to be talking about this and some of the Parapass features that will actually are going to open up some doors for you to new opportunities, but also have a little more protections. But we'll get into that Thursday. But I just want to mention this because I don't talk about it here often. This week alone, we witnessed a Grubhub driver that was carjacked by 13-year-olds with golf clubs. We witnessed a 19-year-old DoorDash driver in Ohio who was carjacked at gunpoint. And the reason I mention the age there is because, again, that person has not much life experience. They really don't understand the protections a W-2 can give. And doing this work, they don't have those protections. So if he were to get shot, we walked through this on the roundtable this week. If you were to get shot and for life had brain damage or whatever, do you know who pays for that? Nobody. Nobody. And do you know the cost of that? Outrageously high. So that's basically, look, we all put our life on the line. It doesn't matter what age you are. But those of us with life experience or who have had salary or W-2 jobs or whatever, we understand things a little more and we can make better decisions. I'm all for gig work for everybody if they want to take this on, and if they think, if it helps them, that's great. But again, we're talking about safety here, so that's why I thought I'd roll all this in. Last, the Instacart IPO. You guys, Instacart is slated to go live on the NASDAQ on September 19th. So we're about 10, 11 days out. And yes, they have gone from 39 billion to a valuation of between 5 and 8 billion. But when Uber and Lyft went live and IPO'd, and Airbnb even, they all just crashed and burned right out of the gate because the NASDAQ and the Dow did not know how to gauge a company without any assets, without any locations, without many employees, but really running off independent contractors. So it didn't see a value, and I think it had a lot of trouble understanding that. With the reduction of Instacart and some of the things they've added, they might be at a true evaluation. Again, they're at what, 1/10 of their value that they were, 1/8, 1/9 that they were just 20 months ago. So I don't know. I'm glad to see them coming out at a lower number. And I think that it might lead to some opportunities, and maybe they will do a little better. We'll see. I am not the biggest Instacart fan. One thing I will say, though, is if you do Instacart and you have done 5,000 or more shops, doesn't matter what state you live in, if you have done that, you qualify to get shares of stock in the company when they go IPO. So if you don't already know about that, check into it, because there is a window of time to claim that, and it's now. Okay, so check into that. If you have any questions or concerns, reach out to the only real gig news out there, me. There's other places reporting, but you can always email me, steve@ridesharerodeo.com. You can go to ridesharerodeo.com. You can listen to the podcast on any podcast player, and you can always check out any social media platform. And that's 13 minutes of news in just under 13 minutes. Peace!